Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at the generation of random data, specifically for the population of SQL Server databases. In this series of videos, I'll be covering the creation and use of libraries. So you might ask, why use libraries? Why not just write code whenever you need it? Well, if you're writing a lot of applications, having common libraries that contain functionality that you use often will save you time, both coding and testing. It will also make your code more readable and therefore maintainable, which is always a good thing. Today we're going to expand on the use of a random data generation library. We have 6 CSV files containing strings. These strings designate cities, departments, first names, surnames, job titles, and streets. We will use the data within these files to generate our random data. This application will run quite happily either in the Windows compiler or in the console compiler. And the number of records it's going to generate is driven by this constant, max records. So at the moment it's set to generate 2000 records. And we're making use of the Random Routines library. This library has a number of functions. First of all, to build the arrays based on our CSV files, and then to generate a number of different fields based on the data within those arrays. Since this is all function-based, you can quite easily see how you can extend the functionality to generate data for other fields containing information that you wish to randomly generate. The first stage of our PB main function is to use the randomize command with the timer as a parameter to allow us to set the random number generator to produce pseudo-random data. And then we will run the generate file function, which takes a single parameter which specifies the name and location of the file to which we wish to write all our insert statements. The data we'll be inserting will be going into a SQL Server database, so this will be SQL Server format SQL. So in our generate file function, we specify first the name and settings for all of the arrays which are going to contain our content of the CSV files. Since we're going to be inserting into a specific table within the database, I've created an str header variable to contain the name of each of the columns within that table. These are the columns for which we're going to generate random data. We will then attempt to wipe the output file should it exist. Then we'll use the build array function from our random routines library to populate each of the arrays with the content of each of the CSV files. Once those are all populated, we can then open our output file in preparation for our records. And then for each of the records we wish to generate, we will then populate a series of variables using the getArrayValue function. This takes as a parameter the name of the array containing the data we wish to get a random element out of. And once all these are populated, we're going to populate a string. And this string is going to be written to our output file. Since we're going to be using Microsoft SQL Server as our database, the syntax of this SQL statement will be Microsoft SQL Server. The table we're inserting into is this one here. It's the user list table. So we're using an insert into command followed by the name of the table. The syntax then expects you to deliver a list of all the columns into which the data is going to go. So we've already populated the str header variable with the name of each of the columns. And this list is delivered within 2 brackets. We then have to deliver the list of the values of the data we're putting into those columns. And this again is preceded by the word values, and then an open bracket, and then a list of each of the values to go in to that record in the table. Our first column is a number, In this case, it's an active flag, so we're just putting the number 1 in here. For the rest of the fields, they're all going to be string fields. And to allow SQL Server to handle these properly, each of the string fields has to be preceded with a single quote and ended with a single quote. PowerBasic has a constant inbuilt to the language to allow you to put a single quote in quite easily. And that is the $SQ constant. So $SQ puts a single quote in front of the value of the first name and then tacks a single quote on the end. And then we're delimiting these by the comma. So having put our first 2 columns in, we merely have to repeat the process for each subsequent column. However, since some of the surnames may well have embedded single quotes within them, this causes SQL Server a problem, as it uses the single quote as the beginning and the end marker for a string. So we have a special function called escape apostrophe. And all escape apostrophe does is it replaces a single quote with 2 single quotes. And this allows SQL Server to treat this as a literal rather than the beginning or the end of a string. So since surnames can contain single quotes, we use the escape apostrophe function to handle that in there, and we do the same with the email, because quite often people's email address does contain their surname. So having built up all of the string for the insert statement, we then write it out to the file and then continue on with the next record. At the end of each string is a go command, and the go command instructs SQL Server to insert the data into the table. So if we try compiling that now, just to make sure it's syntactically okay, and we have a look at our code, we can see we've now got a generate data executable. So if we double click on that now, and we now have the output file, userfile.sql. If we open this up, we'll see that it does indeed contain a number of insert statements. Inserting into our table with a list of all the columns we're going to populate and a list of all the values we're going to populate, which are preceded by a single quote and ended by a single quote when it's a string. And at the end of each insert statement is a go command. And we'll see that it has indeed generated a file which has 10,000 records in it. If you wish to generate more than 2,000 records, say for example we want to push it up to 20,000 records, then it will take slightly longer to generate the file, but it will go fairly quickly. And our user file is now much bigger, containing about 100,000 records. So using this mechanism, you can see it's very easy to generate bulk random data in a form that can be easily inserted into a SQL Server database. And as the random information is all generated in functions, it is quite extensible. So should you find you have a different field you wish to populate, merely create another function. Hopefully you'll find this useful, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.